7 years ago, RWBY debuted right here on the internet. Well, not right here as in this channel, but, here on YouTube. Anyway, 7 years ago, RWBY came out and changed the game for what online content could be. It set the internet on fire in more ways than one, and for 7 years, I never watched it. Until today, that is. Today on the quest log, I look back at the videos that started it all. Today we talked about RWBY Volume 1, and I've got a lot to say.
Pyromaniac, my desire. Thought that you could see the truth till I just burned down the booth. Human Torch can't mess with me. Johnny Blaze, suspect B, scorch him quick, lightning fast, melting britches down to ash. Gasoline, kerosene, strike a match, ignite the scene. Things will never be the same. Feel the fury of my flame. Beg for mercy, it won't help. Embrace the ending you were dealt. Seems you chumps will never learn. Now sit back and watch me burn.
Okay, so I've actually been a fan of RWBY for a good amount of time without actually watching it. It first came out when I was a sophomore in high school, and I remember a classmate of mine made a short AMV for RWBY during my junior year. That was really my first experience with the property. Then I started watching the complete editions of Red vs. Blue that Netflix had at the time, and RWBY was on there as well, so I'd see it there in my suggestions. I was always a big fan of the character designs, and I really loved the music. There were a ton of songs from the show that made it onto my Spotify playlists. And that was about it for like maybe 5 years or so until BlazBlue Crosstag came out, and that was where I got truly exposed to RWBY, though at the time I focused more on the Persona 4 parts of the game since that's what I was the bigger fan of. Fast forward again to today in the quarantine, with nothing much to do, it wasn't long until I began going through my backlog of games, and when you know it, it was time to give Crosstag another try. Now, the way my brain works is if I start to like any fandom, even a little bit, my first step is to get my hands on all the fanfiction I can find, and I hear you judging me for that. Don't. So I start reading a lot of fanfiction for RWBY, but like the really tasteful ones. Okay, and some of the ones aren't all that tasteful. So this all adds up to me sitting in my room with nothing else to do but reading fanfiction about RWBY, listening to RWBY's music, and playing a video game that uses characters from RWBY. It wasn't long until a little voice in my head went, "Hey, why don't you, and stay with me here, actually watch the show?" And as per the usual, I had no retort for the little voice in my head, so I said, sure, why not? I had been almost avoiding the show for a few weeks because a side effect of me entering the show through fandom material was that it built up an expectation in my head of what the show and the characters would be like. And that in turn built up a fear of disappointment. What if the show wasn't what I thought it was going to be? What if it turned out I didn't actually like RWBY all that much? But I did the unthinkable and got my brain to shut up long enough for me to sit down and watch RWBY. And I have to say, I planned on writing notes while I watched Volume 1, but I was so engrossed in the show that I had to watch it twice. Once to just watch it and enjoy it, and then a second time to write down my thoughts for this video. So, spoiler alert, I liked what I saw. This video is going to be more of the positive variety. Now, I'm not saying the show is perfect. In fact, I'll point out some minor issues I have towards the end of the video. But RWBY is one of those shows, and this happens to a lot of shows that have been around for so long, that a lot of people love and a lot of people hate. So having any sort of opinion about it, whether it's positive or negative, will immediately be controversial. And you know what? That's fine. It's fine. I'm fine with it. I don't care anymore. I like the show. People who don't have their own reasons for not liking it, and that's fine. I do want to say before we get started that there is a lot of great RWBY content here on YouTube. I love all the reaction videos and AMVs that are available, and there are great channels that are focused on analyzing RWBY, like Eruption Fane and Unicorn of War. But I've never watched any of their plot analysis videos. I've mainly watched the videos they've done talking about the show's music. I'm saying this just to let everyone know that if there are any similarities between what I say and anything they have said before, it's just because we have similar opinions or just came to the same conclusions. Plus, this isn't really an analysis video per se. I'll give background on what went into early RWBY's production and summarize basically the entirety of Volume 1's plot. I'll give my takes on plot points and the greater meaning and impact of decisions that were made, but the focus of this video is basically just an excuse for me to talk about a show I recently fell in love with, and hopefully we all have some fun along the way. Now, how about we actually start talking about RWBY, huh? RWBY was created by the late great Mani Ohm, and the core concept of the show is based on a reoccurring dream he had where he saw the four main characters in their respective color schemes. Red for RWBY, white for Weiss, black for Blake, and yellow for Yang. And the legend goes that he kept having this dream until one fated night in an IHOP, he decided to just draw a map of the show's world right there on a napkin. And I think I speak for everyone when I say thank God RWBY was created in an IHOP and not at Denny's. Imagine how shitty the show would have been if that had been the case, you know what I'm saying? I spent way too much time on that joke. Anyway, with permission from Rooster Teeth founder Bernie Burns, Mani finished working on Red vs. Blue Season 10 and got busy developing RWBY. To write the story, he enlisted the help of Miles Luna and Carrie Shawcross, who would both go on to direct and showrun RWBY in the future. These two were in charge of not only the larger, overarching narrative the show would take, but they were also responsible for further developing the show's characters past the general descriptions Mani came up with. For example, the main direction Mani allegedly gave them for creating the characters of Nora and Ren was that Nora was powerful and Ren was honorable, while RWBY herself was likewise pitched to Bernie as a badass Red Riding Hood. Now, both the show and its lore are filled with allusions to Grimm's fairy tales and other fables, but Mani often stressed that their characters were not direct adaptations of those classic characters. Parts of Ruby Rose may be inspired by Red Riding Hood, but she is not just a new version of Red Riding Hood. Still, I think it's fun to talk about these parallels, so let's do just that. We already covered Red Riding RWBY, so let's run through the rest of the game. Weiss is based on Snow White, Yang is kind of based on Goldilocks, Blake is based on both the Beauty and the Beast, John is based on Joan of Arc, Nora is based on Thor, yes you heard me, Ren is based on, of all things, Mulan, and Pyrrha is based on Achilles, and no, I don't want to talk about it. And when I say based on, I'm really referring mostly to their art designs and their etymologies. Weiss is based on Snow White only in the sense that her color scheme is white and her favorite abilities mostly involve ice. The two characters share almost nothing in terms of general disposition or wants and desires. Nora is only based on Thor in so much that she has a large hammer, can conduct lightning, and that her last name is Valkyrie, like the Norse warriors of legend. That's different than simply making modern versions of Snow White and Thor. Here, I know, let's really quick compare RWBY and a property that actually does deal in making actual modern adaptations of fairy tale characters. The Fables series, or The Wolf Among Us for you video game fans. That version of Snow White is the very same Snow White plucked from the old stories and dropped into something more familiar to our society. Weiss, on the other hand, is an original character inspired by the core design of Snow White. Although Weiss admittedly has more in common with the Fables version of Snow, but you get my point, I hope. It's adaptation versus illusion. An adaptation is a new take on a tried and true idea. An illusion is something more original that pays tribute to or straight up borrows from something that came before it. Everyone on the same page? Now, the actual design of the characters are based on Mani's original sketches, but he went to artist Eileen Chang to fully flesh these sketches out into a full design, with the final product being a marriage of both of their work. Of course, it's not enough to just have these characters drawn out. You need someone to actually be them as well. So Mani personally handpicked the people around the Rooster Teeth office that he felt fit the characters the best based on their own personalities. For RWBY, he went to Lindsay Jones because she could bounce between moments of silliness and honesty. Cara Ebely was chosen for Weiss because she could be both convincingly kind and cold. Erin Zek was cast as Blake because Mani didn't personally know her all that well, so in his eyes, she was mysterious, just like Blake is in the early episodes of RWBY. And finally, the role of Yane was given to Barbara Dunkelman, because both are confident and don't pay attention to what others think about them. And because they're both awesome. All four of these wonderful ladies are awesome. The rest of the cast would be rounded out by Rooster Teeth veterans like Shannon McCormick, Michael Jones, and Miles Luna. So, we're all set to start talking about Volume 1, right? Not just yet. In the first script I wrote for this video, this was the part where I went into detail and talked about the 4 character trailers that preceded Volume 1, and first introduced Team RWBY to the masses. But then I thought about it, and I realized that the 4 trailers in Volume 1 are really 2 separate entities. The trailers aren't so much an intro to the first season, it's more like they're a general preview to the entire show itself. Because there are plot lines that are introduced in the trailers that don't show up at all in Volume 1. I was honestly shocked to find out that these early episodes of RWBY don't really focus on what I assumed they would. Like RWBY dealing with the death of her mother, Yane's search for her birth mother, Blake's abusive and emotionally manipulative past relationship with Adam Torres, and whatever happened with Weiss's suit of armor. All that stuff would show up in the actual show in later volumes, but the trailers themselves are still really cool and interesting in their own right, so I decided that we'll just talk about them at a later date, in their own video. So, now can we talk about what actually happens in Volume 1? Nope. Because while we've touched on Mani's creative vision and his eye for budding talent, Mani was first and foremost an animator. And RWBY's unique cel-shaded animation style is iconic. So iconic that even 7 years later, these early designs are what many people picture when they think of the show. RWBY was made through a combination of motion capture and manual animation through the software Smith Micro's Poser. Those first 4 trailers I mentioned earlier were made mainly by Mani and Shane Newville, but for Volume 1 they expanded with other animators and modelers. To this day, it's still a pretty heated debate about which art style is better. The way the show looked in these early days or how the show looks now. And while I honestly don't care all that much, I have to say that while the later seasons indisputably look better, the original style is just so charming, man. Why do you need to pick? I like them both. I was blown away how well Volume 1 held up aesthetically. One of the dumb reasons I held off on watching the show for so long was that I felt like the first 2 seasons would be a slog, a chore to get through before I could watch the newer, prettier seasons. I'm really glad to say I was wrong. RWBY is always fun to look at. The characters are so expressive and the action is some of the best I've seen in the entire genre, especially by 2013 standards. It's video game-like in a way that to me felt fresh. It wasn't distracting, and for the time it came from and the amount of manpower behind it, I found it technologically impressive. So, let me check my notes. We've talked about where the idea for the show came from. We talked about what inspired the characters. We talked about the animation. I feel like we're forgetting something.
You guys, did you hear? The school is having a battle of the bands. You know what this means, right? We have to start our own band!
Yes! I'm so edgy and cool. I'm practically a rock star already. I mean, look at me. Just look at me.
And I am musically gifted.
Yeah, I don't know.
Girl band, yay!
I couldn't take it, couldn't stand another minute. Couldn't bear another day without you in it. All of the joy that I had known for all my life was stripped away from me the minute that you died. To have you in my life was all I ever wanted. But now without you, I'm my soul forever haunted. Can't help but feel that I had taken you for granted. No way in hell that I could never comprehend this. I wasn't dreaming when they told me you were gone. I was wide awake and feeling that they had to be wrong. How could you leave me when you swore that you would stay? Now I'm stuck inside of their mirror every single effing day. It's like a movie, but there's not a happy ending. Every scene fades black and there's no pretending. This little fairy tale doesn't seem to end well. There's no night shining armor will wave you from a spell.
The music of RWBY might be the most universally loved aspect of the entire show. The score is great and sets just the right mood for each moment, but the part of the greater soundtrack that we're all thinking about right now are the original songs composed by Jeff Williams. Like I said before, Unicorn of War has a great video that I'll link to down below that explains how the music works thematically and how it exists in the world of RWBY. Basically, the songs tell their own story supplemental to the actual show. They're less about the action that happens in the scenes they play in and more about the general mindset of the characters. Take, for example, the song playing right now. Red Like Roses, Part 2, plays in a bit action scene where Team RWBY and Team Juniper fight some big-ass Grimm, but the song is about a hypothetical conversation between RWBY and her deceased mother, Summer, where both sides share their own frustrations over her untimely demise. The songs kinda exist in two worlds at the same time. In one instance, they are the backdrop for the show's action scenes and end credits, but outside of that, they tell their own stories that you can follow along with and get to know the world better. And I think that's really cool, and generally I'm just a fan whenever a show goes the extra mile to create individual theme songs for their characters, so that's already a plus for me. Like everything else in the show, Monty worked very closely with Jeff to make sure the music set the right tone. Monty himself said on his Twitter that the two would have multiple conversations over how the characters' motivations would fit into the next set of lyrics they were set to work on. That might be my favorite thing about RWBY from a creative standpoint. Not so much what the story is actually about, though I like that too, but the amount of attention paid to every detail of the show's media and the way the audience would consume it. And of course, I can't talk about the show's music without mentioning Casey Lee Williams. Her voice is legit one of the top 2 reasons I probably got into RWBY in the first place, and it resonated with me so much. Her performance is iconic and ingrained into RWBY's DNA, so much so that the show would look completely different without her. Okay, let's talk about what happens in the actual show.
I can't take it anymore! Could everyone just chill out for 2 seconds before something crazy happens again? Yang?
Beware of spoilers, and more spoilers for something that came out 7 years ago. RWBY takes place in the world of Remnant, a fantasy land with futuristic technology. The main threat to peace in Remnant are creatures known as the Grimm, soulless beasts that feed off negative energy. It's the job of elite warriors called huntsmen and huntresses to fight these monsters, and these warriors learned and honed their skills at schools like Beacon Academy. RWBY mostly follows the adventures of 2 such teams. Team RWBY, which consists of the effervescent scythe wielder Ruby Rose, the graceful but cold demeanored dust heiress Weiss Schnee, the reserved and roguish Blake Belladonna, and RWBY's sister, the vibrant brawler Yang Xiaolon, which is a very satisfying name to say out loud. Yang Xiaolon. Yang Xiaolon. And Team Juniper, led by the well-meaning but clumsy Jean Arc, the adorable but mildly psychotic Nora Valkyrie, the kind Amazonian-like Pyrenikos, and the stoic Lai Ren. RWBY, the show, is definitely an ensemble piece, and the ensemble will only grow the longer the show goes on. In this first volume, everyone gets a moment to shine in terms of entertainment value, but when it comes to narrative arcs, Volume 1 is mostly about Ruby, Weiss, Pyrrha, Jean, and Blake in mostly that order. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Chapter 1 of RWBY starts with an intro narrated by goddamn Cortana that provides some background on the world of Remnant, the monstrous Grimm, and the world's energy source, Dust, while we visually see this history told through cave painting-like imagery. The longer this narration goes on, though, the more sinister the tone becomes.
And when they are gone, darkness will return. So you may prepare your guardians. Build your monuments to a so-called free world. But take heed. There will be no victory in strength.
But perhaps victory is in the simpler things that you've long forgotten. Things that require a smaller, more honest soul.
Our story begins for real this time with Roman Torchwit and his gang shaking down a dust shop. Unfortunately for them, this particular store just happens to be where our hero is currently chilling.
Yes?
I said, put your hands in the air, now.
Are you robbing me?
Yes.
Oh.
You were worth every cent. Truly you were. Well, Red, I think we can all say it's been an eventful evening. And as much as I'd love to stick around, I'm afraid this is where we part ways.
Ruby chases Roman across some rooftops and is almost gunned down by a mysterious woman in a helicopter, but she's saved by Glinda Goodwitch, a powerful huntress with powers that have absolutely nothing to do with her surname, though the villains do end up escaping in the end. For her efforts, Ruby is rewarded with a lecture from Glinda about recklessness and responsibility, but she also gives the young girl credit for a job well done. But before she can let her go home, she tells her that there's someone who'd like to meet her first.
Ruby Rose. You have silver eyes. So, where did you learn to do this?
Signal Academy?
They taught you to use one of the most dangerous weapons ever designed?
Well, one teacher in particular.
I see.
Sorry. That's my Uncle Crow. He's a teacher at Signal. I was complete garbage before he took me under his wing, and now I'm all like...
So I've noticed. And what is an adorable girl such as yourself doing at a school designed to train warriors?
Well, I want to be a huntress.
You want to slay monsters?
Yeah. I only have 2 more years of training left at Signal, and then I'm going to apply to Beacon. See, my sister's starting there this year, and she's trying to become a huntress, and I'm trying to become a huntress because I want to help people. And my parents always taught us to help others, so I thought, oh, I might as well make a career out of it. I mean, the police are alright, but huntsmen and huntresses are just so much more romantic and exciting and cool, just, you know?
Do you know who I am?
You're Professor Ozpin. You're the headmaster at Beacon.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
You want to come to my school?
More than anything.
Well, okay.
I think this one little scene does so much. I'd say that a good 80% of what you need to know about RWBY as a character is established right here. You get to know her motivations, her disposition, her eating habits.
It's just that I've only seen one other scythe wielder of that skill before. A dusty old crow.
That's my uncle.
Admittedly, I'm a sucker for scenes like this, where the hero sits in a dark room and is confronted on the why behind their actions. Kinda like in Justice League Unlimited when Batman talks to Green Arrow in the first episode, or in Captain America the First Avenger when Steve finally gets into the Super Soldier program.
We sent the lantern for you because you never gave us an answer.
Come on, I don't belong up here, fighting monsters and aliens and supervillains. I just helped the little guy.
So, you want to go overseas? Kill some Nazis.
Excuse me?
Dr. Abraham Erskine. I represent the Strategic Scientific Reserve.
Steve Rogers.
Where are you from, Mr. Rogers? Is it New Haven? Or Paramos? 5 exams in 5 different cities.
That might not be the right file.
No, it's not the exams I'm interested in. It's the 5 tries. But you didn't answer my question. Do you want to kill Nazis?
Is this a test?
Yes.
I don't want to kill anyone. I don't like bullies. I don't care where they're from.
Scenes like these aren't filled with sweeping action and loud declarations, but what they do is lay down a foundation for the writers to build up their heroes. In RWBY's case, the writers begin with her innocent personality, her mastery of a unique and dangerous weapon, and her desire to be a great huntress. And everything that comes after is done either in service to one of these 3 ideas, or is done to challenge them. Seemingly impressed by what he sees in that one moment, Ozpin enrolls RWBY into Beacon 2 years earlier than she was eligible to, much to the delight of her sister Yang. I've already touched on the comic book style of world building that RWBY occasionally implements, but man, it might just be me, but this ending scene feels like something out of Sky High, the most underrated Disney movie, with a sense of wonder literally shining down on the characters as Glinda goes over everything Beacon has to offer them. And then John vomits on Yane's shoes.
Well, I guess the view isn't for everyone. It was a nice moment while it lasted. I wonder who we're gonna meet. I just hope they're better than Vomit Boy. Oh, Yang, gross! You have puke on your shoe!
Gross.
Get away! Get away from me! Get away from me! Get away from me! Get away from me!
And that's the first episode of RWBY. Well, there is one more thing.
They see you as small and helpless. They see you as just a child. Surprised when they find out that a warrior will soon run wild. Prepare for your greatest moments. Prepare for your finest hour. The dream that you've always dreamed is suddenly about to flower. We are lightning, straight from the thunder. Miracle of ancient wonder. This will be the day we've waited for. This will be the day we open up the door. Evolution, hope you're ready for evolution. Welcome to a world of dissolution. Welcome to a world of bloody evolution. In time, hope will be mine. The story will be told, and victory is in this song.
I adore everything that this first episode did. RWBY is introduced perfectly as a character. All the cool stuff that the show can do with combat is previewed just enough to leave you satisfied while still wanting more, and the tone is clearly set for everyone to understand what type of show RWBY aims to be. In my opinion, it does literally everything you would want a first episode to do. So, Chapter 1 ended with RWBY on top of the world with her head in the clouds. Chapter 2 begins by immediately bringing her crashing right back down to Earth. Like, she literally gets to enjoy being at Beacon for a solid 15 seconds before Yang ditches her to hang out with her friends from her graduating class, who never show up again, mind you. Then RWBY gets to breathe for like 2 seconds and then bumps into Weiss, causes a literal explosion to happen because of this, and then gets quite the earful for her troubles, even though it kinda was her fault, but not really. This gets Blake to intervene, and Blake kinda stands up for Ruby to Weiss, and Ruby starts thinking like, hey, maybe I can make a friend, but then Blake is gone before Ruby can even introduce herself. She is able to make friends with Vomit Boy, though. But seriously, Ruby and John's friendship is one of the more wholesome aspects of the entire show. It's hard to adjust to school life on your own, especially when you don't really have the best social skills. So it's great that these two characters get to find each other and sort of learn on the fly together. Basically, the rest of Chapter 2 and all of Chapter 3 is about Ruby, Weiss, and Yane meeting and arguing with each other while Blake reads a book. It's really good and funny stuff, but you'll have more fun actually watching it than hearing me describe every joke and gag. The important thing to take away from all this narratively is that Ruby's nervous about being the only girl her age going to Beacon, and how people will view her because of the fact that she was pushed ahead a couple grades. All she wants is to be normal, and so far it's not going her way at all. Chapter 4 begins with the introduction of Nora and Ren, and, well...
Wake up, lazy bud! It's morning, it's morning, it's morning, it's morning! I can't believe we've been at Beacon for a full 24 hours. Not that I thought we'd get kicked out or anything. I mean, you're the perfect student and I'm me. But it's just crazy, you know? We've been friends for so long. What are the odds we'd still be together? Well, not together. Not that I'm not saying you're not handsome. You are handsome, but that'd just be weird, right? Right. What was I thinking? But still, I hope we end up on the same team together. Ooh, we should come up with some sort of plan to make sure we end up on the same team together. What if we bribe that master? No, that won't work. He has a school. I know! We'll have some sort of signal, like a distress signal. A secret signal, so we can find each other in the forest. Can you imitate a sloth?
Nora,
Yes, Ren?
I don't think sloths make a lot of noise.
That's why it's perfect! No one will suspect we're working together.
Come on, Nora. Let's go.
But not together.
I wonder what those two are so worked up about.
Oh, who knows?
I just think they're neat. This chapter is all about some of the first interactions between the main cast, and we very quickly see how layered the relationships between these characters already are. Take the show's most famous love triangle for example. John is attracted to Weiss, who really wants nothing to do with him. Sure, she's a bit of an ice queen here, but John isn't exactly respecting her space or putting his best foot forward despite his best efforts to be confident. Like, we know by his interactions with Ruby that John has a kind heart, and this will only be reinforced by his later actions, but let's be honest, who would like to be on the other end of this?
You know what else is great? Me, Jean-Arc. Nice to meet you.
You again? Nice to meet you, Jean.
Yeah. So, Weiss, couldn't help but overhear your fondness of me the other day.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
Don't worry, no need to be embarrassed. So, been hearing rumors about teams. I was thinking you and me would make a good one. What do you say?
Apparently Pyrrha would. She is immediately interested in Jean. She expresses no problem in potentially joining Jean's team. Sidebar, our lovely cast of characters are under the impression that they'll be able to choose their own teams of 4. They'll find out soon enough how true that may or may not be. But anyway, Pyrrha is like smitten. She is making eyes at Jean the entire time. Not that he notices. And Weiss wants to be on Pyrrha's team because she's a bona fide celebrity, like Zion level of college sports fame, even though Weiss is the only one to really comment on this in Volume 1. Which is fine, but one of the things that puts Jean on Pyrrha's radar is that he doesn't know who she is. She, loves this fact because she herself is not a fan of her own fame and the attention it brings. But, everyone else in the main cast, except for Weiss, treats Pyrrha normally, so the main thing that makes Jean seem special is really just the fact that he and Pyrrha share a lot of scenes together. Don't get me wrong, I ship Argos hard, and the concept of Pyrrha hating her fame and craving normalcy in much the same way Ruby does is easy enough to understand on its own, but it would have helped drive it home even better in my opinion if we saw other people react to Pyrrha's fame and try to butter her up besides Weiss. So in review, Jean likes Weiss, who clearly doesn't reciprocate. Pyrrha likes Jean, who's too busy focusing his attention elsewhere to notice. And Weiss wants to partner up with Pyrrha, who, while polite, could really care less.
If only they could see what's right in front of them.
Yeah, if only.
Meanwhile, back in lead character land, RWBY is hoping to get the chance to partner up with Yang, and conversely, Yang thinks it might not be a bad idea for RWBY to make her own friends and toughen up a bit.
You sound like Dad. Okay, first of all, what does meeting people have to do with fighting? And secondly, I don't need people to help me grow up. I drink milk.
But what about when we form teams?
I don't know. I'll just be on your team or something.
Maybe you should try being on someone else's team.
My dearest sister Yang, are you implying that you do not wish to be on the same team as me?
What? No, of course I do. I just thought, I don't know, maybe it would help you break out of your shell.
What the? I don't need to break out of my shell. That's absolutely
ridiculous. There's no way I put my gear in locker 636 yesterday. I would have remembered having to count that high.
Chapters 5 to 7 are all about Beacon's Initiation Day exam, where Ozpin instructs the group to journey deep into the Emerald Forest and bring back one ancient relic per pair. Oh, and you know the whole teaming up thing I mentioned earlier? Well, the partnerships that are meant to last for these kids' entire academic careers are determined by whoever the first person you make eye contact with is once you land. Oh god, it's just like real life high school. And did I say land? Well, yes. Yes, I did.
Good. Now, take your positions.
Sir, I've got, a question. So, this landing strategy thing, what is it? You're, like, dropping us off or something?
No. You will be falling.
Oh, I see. So, like, did you hand out parachutes for us?
No. You will be using your own landing strategy.
Yeah. So, what exactly is a landing strategy?
Our heroes quickly begin to pair up once they reach the ground, as Yang pairs up with Blake, Weiss very reluctantly pairs up with RWBY, Jean pairs up with Pyrrha, and Ren pairs up with Nora, all under the watchful eye of Ozpin and Glinda. Two of these partnerships don't have to make many adjustments to succeed. The other two have a bit of a rockier road to follow. Now, RWBY and Weiss are already starting behind the 8 ball thanks to their seeming lack of compatibility personality-wise, but you could honestly say that about 90% of this show's partnerships. On paper, this show is nothing but odd couples. The problem comes up where you would assume these two gifted young ladies would have none. Combat. What I really enjoy here is that these beginning chapters spend every chance they get to paint Weiss as difficult, and RWBY is the one who wants to reach out and get on the same page. Yet, here in the Emerald Forest, this idea is flipped right onto its head. Now, Weiss is the one who tries to strategize and work together, and RWBY is the one who rushes into the fight with like zero regard for her own partner's safety, screwing up what should have been an easy fight with some pretty basic level grim. And she even blames Weiss for getting in her way. It's little touches like this that evolve these characters past the archetypes they were built on. It keeps RWBY from simply being the nice one and Weiss being the mean one. It keeps them from just being the Ice Queen and her bubbly companion that tries her best to thaw her, which, you know, they are, but this reminds us that at their core, they're really just young women learning as they go. At this point, we've spent more time with RWBY than anyone, so we've been conditioned to feel sympathy for her and frustration at Weiss's behavior. Narrative-wise, Weiss is the closest thing we've had to an antagonist besides Roman for a few minutes, because she's the one blocking RWBY, the protagonist, from what she wants: normalcy and friendship. But in this moment, RWBY is the one getting in her own way. Here, she proves Weiss's constant claims of immaturity right by allowing her frustration and impulsiveness to get the better of her. And honestly, she's lucky she didn't get both of them killed. Meanwhile, Jean and Pyrrha have the opposite problem. They immediately hit it off with the most natural chemistry we've seen out of any of the couplings up to this point. When Jean displays his utter lack of knowledge for simple things such as what aura is and utterly fails to play it off, Pyrrha doesn't mock or reprimand him. She teaches him what she knows. And she does it at a speed that she knows he can keep up with.
Now, close your eyes and concentrate.
Okay.
For it is in passing that we achieve immortality. Through this, we become a paragon of virtue and glory to rise above all, infinite in distance and unbound by death. I release your soul, and by my shoulder protect thee.
Pyrrha?
It's all right. I used my aura to unlock yours, but the energy that protects you now is your own. You have a lot of it.
Their problem stems from a gap in ability. Pyrrha has a case for being one of the strongest in her class, with combat skills that have taken her all the way to the top of the tournament world. Think the NCAA with a little less corruption, I am assuming. While Jean is raw and unpolished, he's got plenty of potential mixed in with the right amount of heart, and Pyrrha is the perfect person to unlock it, but this idea of Jean dragging Pyrrha down, or Pyrrha being hampered by looking out for him, is not going to go away anytime soon. It'll hurt them in combat. It'll hurt their mental states the longer the idea permeates. And it might just cost one of them everything. Ominous foreshadowing aside, the gang trek further into their respective corners of the forest in search of the relics. Some find them with ease. Others find trouble. Various set-piece-sized Grimm drive our main characters back into one area right in front of the very relics they needed to pass the initiation. Convenient. Weiss ends up saving RWBY from a Death Stalker when given the opportunity, and the two finally reach an understanding.
I can be a bit difficult, but if we're going to do this, we're going to have to do this together. So if you quit trying to show off, I'll be nicer.
I'm not trying to show off. I want you to know I can do this.
You're fine.
The group then come to an agreement that discretion is the better part of valor and decide to grab the relics and dash away, with RWBY filling a leadership role that fills Yang with quiet pride and joy. Naturally, the Death Stalker and a Nevermore that had terrorized RWBY and Weiss earlier chase after the kids, which leads to the volume's largest action scene as the future Team Juniper battles the Death Stalker and the future Team RWBY take care of the Nevermore. Not only is the action crisp and dynamic, but in between we see glimpses of how the characters will interact and bond as the show goes on. In the span of 5+ minutes, we see the level of concern that Nora naturally holds for Ren's safety, we see how Jean and Pyrrha move together in perfect rhythm despite their different levels of capability, we see more of Yang's temperament in battle, Blake's quiet calm under pressure, and Jean's surprising aptitude for strategy. And to top it all off, RWBY and Weiss combine their skills to deliver the killing blow to the Nevermore. There's still plenty of action to come in this volume, but nothing comes close to matching this scene in terms of pure bombacity. I'm not sure if that's an actual word or not, but yeah, let's go with it. With the relics in hand, all our kids made it into Beacon, and are officially divided into Team RWBY and Team Juniper. We get to see Nora hug Ren for the first time on screen, Pyrrha beam with joy at the fact that Jean was chosen as their leader, and Weiss quietly display the opposite when RWBY is chosen. They may have come to an understanding, but their friendship is still far from smooth sailing. Roman, meanwhile, gets his obligatory supervillain "we're gonna need more men" moment at the very end of all this, but more importantly, it's time for the kids to start school.
Now that you're awake, we can officially begin our first order of business. Excuse me? Decorating!
Chapter 9 is full of fun shenanigans as Team RWBY goes about setting up their room with very stable looking bunk beds, but the real meat of this 2-chapter storyline is in Chapter 10. As the girls get accustomed to their new classes and their eccentric new instructors, Weiss's frustration with Ruby's lax attitude as a leader and student boils to a head as she berates the younger girl for cheering her on and distracting her in a class demonstration. So it becomes pretty clear pretty quickly that she's really just bitter about not being chosen as the leader herself. Thankfully, a talk with Professor Port helps her recognize her own flaws that disqualified her from being in charge.
With all due respect, your exceptional skill on the battlefield is matched only by your poor attitude.
Dare you?
My point exactly. I see a girl before me who has spent her entire life getting exactly what she wanted. So the outcome did not fall in your favor. Do you really believe that acting in such a manner would cause those in power to reconsider their decision? So instead of fretting about what you don't have, savor what you do. Hone your skills, perfect every technique, and be not the best leader, but the best person you can be.
At the same time, Ozpin reaffirms a rather blue Ruby that she has what it takes to be great, telling her to trust his judgment even if she doesn't trust herself. I mean, it's not like this dude just launched her and all her friends in the air off a cliff or anything, so yeah, let's go with it. The chapter ends with a really sweet scene where Weiss lends Ruby her mostly undivided support and promises to help her become the best leader she can be.
Just know that I am going to be the best teammate you will ever have. Good luck studying. That's wrong, by the way.
It only took 10 chapters, but the pair have finally become true friends. Ah, friendship. A true hallmark of the school-going experience. As is bullying and emotional blackmail, which is what the next 4 chapters are all about. Gotta love those transitions, man. Some time passes, it's not really clear how much, and the kids are pretty much adjusted to their crazy, legally questionable school life. Well, everyone except John is, who's not only been struggling with grasping how to best use his aura and, pay attention in class, but he's also being constantly tormented by bully dude bro Cardin Winchester. Pyrrha, being already head over heels for him at this point, and more importantly a decent human being, offers to help Jean train. The problem is that the objectification of her affection isn't exactly in a healthy state of mind to accept the offer for what it is. Instead, he takes it as pity and lashes out at her before confessing to lying his way into Beacon, thus explaining both his whole Joan of Arc illusion thing and his inferiority complex. The Joan of Arc thing is just a cool little bit of character design, but his greater emotional trauma is attributed to the crushing expectations of living up to an entire family line of great huntsmen. Yet, despite it all, Pyrrha is barely affected by this revelation and reiterates her desire to help her friend and leader, but still he pushes her away.
Don't you understand? If I can't do this on my own, then what good am I? Just leave me alone, okay?
If that's what you think is best.
Which is a super fucked decision because, dun dun, Cardin was listening the entire time. And of course, he totally uses this information to blackmail Jean into doing whatever he says, or else he'll share his dirty little secret and boom, expulsion. So, not another teen movie commences, and Jean starts to do Team Cardinal's homework, supply prank material for them, and neglect his actual friends, which is the only thing in the entire world that can make Pyrrha act anything but loving towards him. Luckily, Ruby's there to fill the Ozpin role for Jean and tell him that even though he's afraid of failing his team, he shouldn't worry because he's simply not allowed to fail. It's his job to be there for them, which he hasn't been. Couple days or a day, it's hard to tell later, Glinda leads the class on a field trip to Forever Falls to collect some jam for Professor Peach, not Pitchard. And John, still separated from his friends, not only does all the work for Cardinal, but they also expect him to throw the jam at Pyrrha to attract a bunch of wasps that they also had John collect. Man, for such a clumsy guy, he sure does a lot. Anyway, this is finally enough for Jean to stand up for himself, and he instead throws the jam right at Cardin. But before Cardin could follow through on his promise of physical harm, a wild Ursa appears to fuck shit up. John, however, stays calm and rises to the occasion. He protects Cardin, and with some unseen help from his partner, slays the Ursa. He even helps his bully back to his feet, but not before offering him one last warning.
John, don't ever mess with my team, my friends, ever again. Got it?
That night, Jean and Pyrrha finally reconcile and apologize to each other and agree to train together in a really, really sweet scene. Like, you could just feel the love tonight.
Pyrrha, I'm sorry. I was a jerk. You were only trying to be nice, and I had all this stupid macho stuff in my head.
John, it's okay. Your team really misses their leader, you know.
You should come down. Ren made pancakes.
And then, there were 2 chapters left. Team RWBY goes out to the nearby city of Vale, where everyone is preparing for the upcoming Vital Festival, an event where students come from different schools all over the map to test their mettle against each other in a tournament arc. But that's a story for a future season. In their travels, they noticed a dust shop that was robbed in a similar manner to the one in Chapter 1, and then they witnessed a stowaway monkey faunus fleeing from a ship that had just come in. Oh, by the way, I didn't get a chance to bring this up earlier in a cool, natural way, but in the world of Remnant, there is another species besides the humans and the Grimm, the faunus. The faunus are a historically disenfranchised breed of human-animal hybrids that are plainly more human than animal, but still face just the amount of racism and prejudice that you would expect. Those masked guys that were with Roman and his evil plotting scene actually belong to the White Fang, a political protest group that had morphed into a terrorist organization. Anyway, Sun, the monkey faunus, manages to give the authorities the slip and make eyes with Blake while doing so. Weiss, who really does not seem to be a huge fan of this faunus or the faunus in general, urges that they chase after him. In doing so, they, Weiss, bumps into Penny, a totally normal girl who definitely understands social cues that RWBY, the girl, not the team, inadvertently befriends.
What did you call me? Oh, I'm really sorry. I definitely didn't think you heard me.
No, not you. You.
Me? I don't know,
You called me friend. Am I really your friend?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Sensational! We can paint our nails and try on clothes and talk about cute boys.
Oh, is this what it was like when you met me?
No, she seems far more coordinated.
Things get awkward real quick because Weiss starts to say some real racist shit about the faunus, which pisses Blake off, and this all devolves into another argument between the two that carries all the way back to the dorms, and it all reeks of certain corners of the internet, but it works here since we finally learn more about both girls' backgrounds. Blake accuses Weiss of being discriminatory towards the faunus, even going as far to compare her to Cardin of all people, but Weiss reveals that the White Fang have been terrorizing her family her entire childhood, and as a young girl she had to watch people she knew live in fear and saw even a few of them end up assassinated. Then the bomb is dropped as Blake accidentally reveals she's a faunus and runs off into the night only to bump into Sun. It turns out that bow she wears was hiding a cute pair of cat ears the whole time. In the final chapter, Blake reveals her background with the White Fang, how she was recruited at a young age back when the Fang was still a peaceful organization, how new leadership took the group in a more violent direction, and how that led her to make the decision to leave and become a huntress, a more positive force for change.
It was just an idea. Yeah, bad one.
Weiss, I think we should hear her side of the story before we jump to any conclusions.
I think when we hear it, you'll all realize I was right.
And I think Weiss's hair looks wonderful today. Ah, Penny, where did you come from?
Team RWBY, Weiss, Penny, and Yang go off in search of Blake, though Weiss is back to her Ice Queen tendencies, but it sure feels like she just feels hurt by her friend. I mean, she does accuse Blake of basically being a criminal a couple times, but this is Weiss we're talking about. That's not like that bad by her standards of insult use. Okay, it's still super racist, but she gets better, I promise. Blake and Sun end up tracking the White Fang to the docks in the middle of some nefarious going-ons with the shipments of stolen dust. And surprise, surprise, the very human Roman is revealed to be working with the very anti-human group. This causes Blake to jump the gun because she just can't understand why the White Fang would work with someone like Roman. And wouldn't you know it, this causes a fight to break out. Sun battles Roman with his nunchuck pistols in a really cool fight scene, but our two fondest heroes are still outnumbered. Luckily, the noise ended up drawing RWBY and Penny to the dock, where Penny wrecked shop with a bunch of telekinetic knives that came out of a compartment in her back, but remember, totally human.
These kids just keep getting weirder.
The authorities and the rest of Team RWBY arrive to apprehend the White Fang members, though Roman gets away again. But more importantly, Weiss and Blake bury the hatchet in a very touching scene where they decide that their friendship and each other are more important than whatever old blood feuds they've both been carrying around. The song Wings is a perfect companion to this scene because the line "patience is hard to come by" fits the entire overarching relationship arc of the main cast. I'm not always in the business of attributing a meaning to everything I watch, but you could definitely make an argument that the core theme of this first volume is these young adults learning how to be patient with each other. Unfortunately, Penny doesn't get to stick around for the celebration as a man in a limousine quietly scolds her for getting involved in something she had no business with. It's pretty heartbreaking, dude. Like, Penny is kind of the butt of most jokes in these two chapters, but she's the one that ends up saving the day. And all she wanted was real friends, but she doesn't even get the chance to enjoy that, which would be more than a suitable reward for all the good she did. Back at the academy, we see that Ozpin had been watching the entire ordeal remotely, and then RWBY's Uncle Crow sends him a message that the Queen is moving her pawns around. The credits roll on a silhouette of Beacon Academy backdrop to the shattered moon. Then we did a post-credit scene where Cinder, Emerald, and Mercury are revealed to set the stage for a future showdown. That's Volume 1 of RWBY. I'm not gonna lie, the first time I watched this, I thought the ending was, I want to say abrupt, but that gives off a negative connotation that I don't agree with in this case. It's more like I was surprised by how brief this first volume was. But I think that may have more to do with the fact that I was already familiar with the fandom and certain plot points before I actually watched it. So there were things I expected to be there that just weren't. For example, one of the most talked about aspects of RWBY in general is the relationship between Blake and Yang. And in Volume 1, they really don't interact a ton. Like, you can definitely still feel the chemistry between them, but most of the moments they share are as a part of the greater ensemble. It didn't make the show any better or worse for me, it was just something I found surprising. And as for how important Sun and Penny end up being for the show's last arc, they do show up pretty late. As soon as you start to get to know them, the volume's over. But that's not that huge of a problem when I can just boot up the next volumes and see them get more attention and more time to get fleshed out. That's a benefit for waiting to watch the show so long. I can just watch the next seasons because they're out. And you have to remember that RWBY, really more so back in 2013 than right now, wasn't released as a traditional 20-minute per episode animated show. The longest episode of the volume is a little over 15 minutes, and the shortest was barely 4 minutes, mathematically averaging out to be about 11 minutes per episode, but really most episodes were in that 5 to 7 minute range. It was decidedly a very internet way to release content. You can feel how it was meant for YouTube. They weren't these long, drawn-out anime episodes, they were quick weekly videos. And I love anime, but I appreciated how consistent the pace in RWBY was. every time I thought the show was about to drag, it didn't. For example, I really thought the RWBY and Weiss storyline would be so much to handle that it wouldn't be fun to watch. This is more of a personal thing, but sometimes when main characters have tension and the show goes out of its way to constantly highlight that tension, it can tire me out as a viewer. RWBY didn't go that route. It trusts the viewer to understand why and where RWBY and Weiss's tension came from, and it doesn't waste time fixing that issue organically. But it also doesn't rush to make them best friends. Relationships are a constant process. Each hill that you climb leads to another one on the horizon, so that made their relationship feel real to me, at least. On a similar note, I like that RWBY didn't shoehorn certain running gags into every arc just to remind the audience that, hey, this is a thing. When Jean goes through his situation with Pyrrha and Cardin, they didn't throw in any overt mentions of his crush on Weiss because it wouldn't have fit the situation and the mood. What I'm really trying to get at is that for me, the show was never anything but a joy to watch. Because I love a lot of shows, but some of them have moments that make getting through the whole thing a slog. And hey, some of you may feel that way about RWBY, and that's okay. The cool thing is, my opinion doesn't cancel out yours and vice versa. The closest thing I have to a nitpick is that it would have helped if they had quick little blurbs explaining the characters' semblances, their superpowers, a la the way My Hero Academia does with their quirks. This is the closest we get to that in the entire volume.
My semblance is polarity.
You can control poles. No, you dunce. It means she has control over magnetism.
Magnets are cool too.
Granted, pausing to give a rapid-fire explanation for each character's semblance could bog down the pacing, since they didn't have as much time to tell their story the way My Hero did with their more normal-length episodes. And it's a very strange feeling for me to critique something in a vacuum when I already know what comes next. But man, I just love this show. It boasts what may very well be my favorite cast of characters in anything, and yes, that includes Persona and Fire Emblem. I love all of these characters to the moon and back, with RWBY herself serving as one of my favorite protagonists. The show is absolutely gorgeous to look at, and the action floored me. RWBY has everything that I want out of a TV show. Action, comedy, a little bit of romance. Hell, red's even my favorite color. That's not really that important, that's just a little bit I like to share when given the chance. I'm not joking though, RWBY is one of my favorite things that I have ever watched. It felt like a show I always wanted to exist when I was younger. Watching it took me back to all the hours I spent watching stuff like Power Rangers and Justice League, but it still fits how my tastes have changed and grown over the years. It felt like RWBY was a natural evolution of all my favorite childhood shows. And you know what? I think that's pretty magical. If I had to pick a favorite episode, it's between Chapter 1 and Chapter 8. The introduction to RWBY and the final battle in the Emerald Forest respectively. My favorite narrative arc was Jean and Pyrrha's in chapters 10 through 13. My favorite character in these first few episodes were a toss-up between RWBY, Weiss, and Pyrrha, and here are just a few of my favorite moments from Volume 1.
Wait, you're fighting in the tournament? I'm combat ready. Forgive me, but you hardly look the part.
Says the girl wearing a dress.
It's a combat skirt.
Yeah. Aw, it's broken.
Nora? Please, don't ever do that again.
I'm queen of the castle. I'm queen of the castle.
Nora!
Pyrrha!
Whoa!
RWBY!
RWBY?
Yang! Nora! How could you leave me? I said jump.
She's gonna fall.
She'll be fine.
She's falling.
Yeah. Just dropping in. Oh, God. No!
My hero.
My back.
Great! The gang's all here. Now we could die together.
She does like tuna a lot. Right, guys? It sure is windy today.
Look, I'm not claiming to be anything but, well, simple as a viewer. If I can go back and watch the show multiple times and feel a connection to the show, then in my book, it's good. I don't always feel the need to grade everything I consume. I'm not saying I always turn my writer's brain off and put blinders on. I'm just saying that, as a viewer, I don't always care if, for example, the writing doesn't always maintain this perfect level of quality. I just care if I enjoy what I am watching. And I know that makes me the devil, but whatever, it's fun. I do want to say that I am not anti-criticism. It's just not what's always important to me. I don't need to be affirmed that other people like the same things that I do. I got over that when Smash Bros. Ruined the Persona community. Like, I get it. It's fun to critique things. It can be a healthy way to understand why you like the things you like and why you don't like the things you don't. And as a creator, it can break down the tools you have at your disposal to see what works and what doesn't work, for lack of a better term. There needs to be a line of communication between the person making the thing and the people who consume said thing. That's the main way improvements are made. Because make no mistake, Captain America Civil War 100% turned out the way it did because of how meh people felt about Age of Ultron. For me, criticism boils down to whether or not something speaks to you. Because while no one on the internet wants to admit this, everyone has a different emotional response to, well, everything. People who never liked RWBY are valid. People who loved RWBY and grew to hate it are valid. And strangely enough, people who love RWBY are valid. RWBY spoke to me, so I like it. Can I explain why it spoke to me? Not really. I just know that RWBY and its characters made me happy in a time where, quite honestly, it's getting harder and harder to find reasons to be. Watching RWBY felt like being reunited with old friends in the sense that I was already familiar with the characters from other media, and in the sense that it reminded me of the shows I grew up on, the shows that formed me. And it turns out that there are quite a few people that feel the same way. That's where I believe the true beauty of RWBY lies. The fact that it's given people an outlet, a place to escape to, an inspiration to create their own stories in the vein of Monty's original spirit and vision. Sometimes it's simple, guys. Sometimes you just love something because it fills you with joy. I figure that in the world we live in right now, that's not all that bad of a thing. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, then thank you so much. It's the most difficult thing I've ever worked on. I was reworking the script up until the moment I finished recording, and speaking of recording, it took me 3 days to get this just right, and I don't even want to think about how long it took to edit. But I think it's worth it. I want to do more video essays here on the channel. I want to do more quest logs. I definitely want to do more videos about RWBY, whether it's character analysis, maybe go more in depth about my favorite moments and ships. But anyway, until next time, be safe out there, be kind to each other, and I'll see you later. I'm gonna go watch Volume 2.
Is a long night when you're searching